Yeah, revolutionary greetings to you all, comrades. It's a pleasure to have this session again this week. And welcome to Consciousness Study Group, our Thursday session where we do a discussion and review of Kwame Nkrumah's book, Consciousness. So once again, feel most welcome. We are in the continuation of our reading from where we left and our discussion from where we left last time. The paragraph highlighted is the paragraph we'll be reading. Last time we read a bit about the history and misrepresentation of the history of Africa, and hope that conversation continues today. So as usual, I'll request any member who's willing to read for us to please go ahead. And if there's none, then I'll request Sister Portia to read for us. Okay, Sister Portia, please read for us. Sister Tapua, do you want to read for us?
It's all right. I think Sister Portia was responding already. It's okay.
Okay, so Sister Portia, please go ahead.
Queen Sister Tapua, I can yield, no problem. If your voice is equally beautiful, I can yield if it's okay.
All right, it's okay. I'll read. Earlier on, such disparaging accounts had been given of African society and culture as to appear to justify slavery, and slavery posed against these accounts seemed a positive deliverance of our ancestors. Oh my God. When the slave trade and slavery became illegal, the experts on Africa yielded to the new wind of change and now began to present African culture and society as being so rudimentary and primitive that colonialism was a duty of Christianity and civilization. Even if we were no longer on the evidence of the shape of our skulls, regarded as the missing link, unblessed with the arts of good governance, material and spiritual progress, we were still regarded as representing the infancy of mankind. Our highly sophisticated culture was said to be simple and paralyzed by inertia. So, and we had to be encumbered with tutelage. And this tutelage, it was thought, could only be implemented if we were first subjugated politically.
Wow, that's a heavy text. Thanks for the reading. But I request Sister Portia read for us the previous paragraph. There's a need why I think we need to connect the two. So Sister Portia, are you able to read for us the previous paragraph, the one of this? Then we can come back to this and start sharing our thinking on this, because I think we need to connect them at this particular moment. Please.
Now, of course, King Brother, the one that starts with 1. Yes, King Brother?
Yes, please.
One of these subtle methods is to be found in the account of history. The history of Africa, as presented by European scholars, has been encumbered with malicious myths. It was even denied that we were a historical people. It was said that whereas other continents had shaped history and determined its course, Africa had stood still, held down by inertia, that Africa was only propelled into history by the European contact. African history was therefore presented as an extension of European history. Hegel's authority was lent to this ahistorical hypothesis concerning Africa, which he himself unhappily helped to promote. An apologist of colonialism lost little time in seizing upon it and writing wildly thereon. In presenting the history of Africa as the history of the collapse of our traditional societies in the presence of the European advent, colonialism and imperialism employed their account of African history and anthropology as an instrument of their oppressive ideology.
Thank you so much. We have read it too, and I think it is very important for us to do that connection. Now, who is ready to go first? Or is there any word we need to define in this paragraph? Any word?
Rudimentary.
That's one. Anybody who is willing to defend that one?
I would say it's basic, very basic, banal, very, very basic.
Yes, basic. Any other one?
Disparaging and tutelage.
Mr. Tapo, you can go ahead.
Thank you. To disparage is to say negative things about something, to not give it credit at all.
About tutelage?
Teaching.
Tutelage.
Teaching, teaching by, it's like the root word is to tutor. When you go for tutoring, it's almost like one-to-one. You really have to pay attention to whoever you're tutoring based on their skills. So tutelage is the process of tutoring.
Okay, thank you. Any other one? Okay. So yes, we can start. Who is willing to start first? Anybody who is willing to share their thought first? Anybody?
Can I go?
Yeah, please, Mr. Tapo.
Right. I'm looking at the last sentence in the highlighted paragraph. And this tutelage, it was thought, could only be implemented if we were first subjugated politically. For me, this sentence sums up the view that the colonizers had of us. That whilst they were disparaging us and trying to say all these negative things and trying to justify their colonizing us or changing the form from slavery to colonialism, they still thought we were a force to contend with. I'm looking at the word the first, subjugate. Because to subjugate is to put someone under your authority, to disempower them. So if they're going to say the only way we could be taught the European way was to first of all destroy us politically. And when we're talking about politics, we're talking about governance. They are acknowledging that we had governance that they had to contend with, that without addressing the strength in our governance, they would not have been successful, which is why there was the divide and rule, which is why I always like to go back to Chinua Achebe and Things Fall Apart, when he says, the white man is clever. There are only 2 of them in Umofia, and there are a whole lot of us. Our problem is they have taken over our brothers who have gone on to tell them our way of life, and therefore they're able to destroy us. So this is where our downfall lies, that the fact that there's an acknowledgement with the governance that they had to contend with. The only way they could take over was divide and rule. And all this, everything else before that sentence, is a dance around how they would do it and the things that they had to contend with. So, like my sister Portia was asking, I think it was 2 days ago, I'm not sure whether it was in this forum or in other forum, where she was saying, we've always been talking about our culture being great, us being great people, but the way we feel as we are living life today, we're struggling to get it. This is how they did it. They are acknowledging that we were great. They're acknowledging that they had to find a way to subjugate our political systems. And if you look at the results today, they did. I mean, this democracy can't work. It won't work. And it's because they know it shouldn't work. And I think Pan-Africanism, getting us all together to work together, to hold on to who we truly are, and understand as we're living life today, that we have the ability to go back into our own history and look. Because what they're saying here, my brothers and sisters, is that if we get to know our own history, then we begin to understand who we are. So they are making our history part of their history, so we don't understand ourselves and know ourselves. And what worse subjugation is that? When they take our history and make it their history, they're telling us about us from their point of view. We should find our eyes and wake up and tell our own history from our own point of view. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for allowing me to speak for so long. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Tapua. You don't need to apologize. Once we go through all other speakers as well, we'll come back to you for more input. So just if you have any other extra thoughts, know that we'll come back and we'll be able to share them. Any other member who is willing to share their thoughts on this? Anybody? Oh, Elder Sam.
Yeah.
Elder Sam, please go ahead.
I think Sister Tapua has captured and gave us a big background around this, but I want to emphasize one or two or just illustrate with some examples. You know, as we have said, even in previous presentations, they are the subtle ways, they are the open ways that the colonialists employed in our colonization. But I think it is important to emphasize certain things. You know, in those early days, they even classified us as a dark continent. You know, they associated everything. And that's why you get all these myths of wedding, like black magic, all these things that have a bad connected about us. And classifying us, you know, when they say we're in the infancy of humankind, when we know we were not in the infancy, in fact, we were in the cradle, we are the cradle of mankind. Humanity and everything came and started here in Africa. So we were not in infancy, we were already and high above everyone. In fact, in our previous studies, we also learned that even all these ideologies that they are talking about, all the scripts they wrote, they took most of these from Africa. And the greatest example is the scrolls and writings that came from Timbuktu, which date as far back as 13th century and so forth. So they used all methodologies to belittle us, our history, to nullify it, but long before even they touched our continent, our ancestors had already written our history, their development on the rocks, which even today, the matter that they used, the ink that they used is still visible and can still be seen today, showing that we had developed. We were not in inertia, as they say. We had all the ability. We had, by that time, you know, the Zimbabweans that Sister Tapua can tell us much about, were built, well-built structures that are still standing even today, where mortar, ordinary mortar that, you know, was not used, but the stones are still held onto each other even today. Prove that we were far developed and we were not this little belittled non-entity that they want to propagate around us. But I want to bring it to today. You know, these myths still operate even in today. In the culture of the Xhosa in South Africa, there's a story that they say there was a prophetess in among the Xhosas who prophesied that if the Xhosa people kill their cattle, all what they had, burn their fields and their crops, then that will appease our ancestors. And then once the ancestors are appeased, we will be able to get rid of the colonialists. It is a story, it is there, it is written about. But if you are well versed with the machinations that they used to rob our people, you will know that surely this should have been somebody orchestrated by the whites. In that time, Christianity was being brought in and few of our people were being converted. Surely they must have used one of the converted to act like a spirit. They say it was next the river where he saw the spirit. He could have been somebody who was converted using a voice that say, my child, go and tell them they must slaughter them. It could have been the whites that were propagating that. And indeed, the Xhosa killed slaughtered their cattle. But the idea was to make our poor people poor and dependent now on these new colonialist masters that have come in our land. And these are several of the stories. There's another story in the Botswana tribe where they say when the colonialists were coming, they said, let us make them unhappy. Let them not catch us. Let us throw ourselves into the river. something like that. There's nothing, nobody can just kill himself. We know that the Botswanas fought great battles. All our ancestors fought big battles with the invaders. They will not just say, let us throw ourselves into the river so that they don't get us. Nothing like that. But all these are myths that are driven to keep our population under oppression and mentally unfree and stable. And you can see the effects even today. I think the other day we spent a whole session in the International Solidarity Sunday session where we were talking about how Trump is treating our leaders in going to the White House. It is still based on that thing that these Americans are big, these Americans have everything, and then we are this little president. When this was president to president. So we need to demystify all these. We need to take our people hand by hand and teach them that you have been the cradle of mankind. You were developed before the foreigners came, and you must, as the Sahel leaders are teaching us, fight and drive them away from your continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Sam. Thank you very much. Who is willing to go next? I'll come back to round 2 of this. Who is willing to go next? Anybody?
Brother Begin,
Yeah, Kawindo.
this line that says, slavery posed against these accounts seemed a positive deliverance of our ancestors. Is it biblical or is it philosophical? Deliverance. Why would it seem a positive deliverance of our ancestors if the accounts themselves were not best befitting the African situation? I don't know whether my question is clear.
Yes, Kawindo. Anybody who can help answer Kawindo?
If it's
Brother
okay,
Ben? Let's have Brother Ben coming in for control, and you can come back to you. Brother Ben, please go ahead.
Sorry, Sister Tapua. Okay. You see, I have studied theology. I have gone very deep than I always say than some of these big bishops have done. But there are a lot to talk from there. And excuse me, I want to talk certain things which are very sensitive. But even some of the Abrahamic faith, you see, these were created. I can't remember. There's a book called Black Gold, which you can only get it from a Christian institution in Singapore. And in it, one of this dominant faith.
Brother Osu,
Yes.
please text the title of that book in the chat, please. If you find any time to text it,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Okay. And in fact, the author described how these Europeans with their monks can just create anything and present it as a spiritual material. You see, so sometimes some of these, I have seen an angel and all those things. In fact, there are ways to do them. And that's why I will agree with Brother Sam that they might have, just knowing that we don't know much about them, have just made one to meet this woman who was the Sangoma and then said that, go and tell the people this. Of course. You see, as I said, I don't want to get into the sensitive aspect, but there are a lot that European elites, let me put it that way, they falsify things and create a lot of things which they know that it will help them to get the material things that they want. They are so strongly attached to material that they are willing to die for material things, which in Africa, because of our maturity on this continent, it's not like that. It's not like we have come from another planet and we are rushing to take over everything. You find that they put their name on everything. They come and know this is the mountain, it already got a name, but they would put their name that I am the one who came, David Livingston, Mango Park, and whatever. You see, so I feel that at this stage, in this present age, we need to do away with fear and write, you see, to debunk some of all these things. And I quite remember 2020, COVID time, I visited, I don't go to church, but somebody just said, accompany me, we are going to visit this place, that we'll be invited. And the first time I heard the preacher who preached without mentioning Jesus, but was able to debunk everything that the white people have done to our forests, to our mountains, to our rivers, to our towns and villages. You see, so it's time that I feel that we need to write and talk more using social media and everything to educate the young ones especially, because some of the older people, there's no way, like you talk about inertia, they are put, there's no way they can change. Some are also benefiting from this system. But the young people who feel confused and who feel like they compare themselves to Asians, they compare themselves to other places, and they feel that what is happening to us. I feel that these are the ones that we need to begin to write for them to read, and then whichever media that they feel, how do I put it, they like, we should use such media to actually give them the truth. You see, recently I've been been very, very critical about some of our academics. That imagine that I'm a researcher, and a researcher cannot know that this thing is not true. Or is it that we deliberately decide that, look, let us all follow the lie? As one friend of mine said that, look, you just follow the tide. So if Africa wants to follow the tide, for me, it means that we have sold ourselves. And like our brother Sam said, I mean, how can America sit in Washington and say that South Africa is with China, so we are going to sanction ANC leaders? But my concern is that ANC itself also play its game by wanting to feed from everywhere. You see, you can't say somebody is not, is an enemy or he was against you, but then you go to that person and say that now help me. I think ANC also has got this problem. You see, so this is how I look at sometimes in Africa. We also contribute to what happened to us. But in this present age, I feel that we need to stand up against these things if the future is going to be good for us and our young ones are going to feel confident and rise. We need to actually point to, how do I put it, point to the black and white as black and white as black as white. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sister Topo, would you like to come in to help answer Brother Windhoek's question?
Yes, please. May I ask that you show me the last part of the first sentence on the above the paragraph that's highlighted, please? The last sentence. Yes, thank you. That's okay. That's all right. Okay. It says, I want us to go back to this sentence because of the expression in the highlighted, the first line in the highlighted paragraph, which says, earlier on, such disparaging accounts had been given of African society and culture as to appear. So the such disparaging accounts here is referring to what's been said in the paragraph above. And the summative sentence of that paragraph reads, in presenting the history of Africa as the history of the collapse of our traditional societies, in the presence of the European advent, colonialism and imperialism employed their account of African history and anthropology as an instrument of their oppressive ideology. I'm still going back to the fact that this text shows us that Africa was perceived as the place from which European greatness would be achieved. Whether it be slavery time, they still had to come here to find the wealth that they wanted. After slavery, they still had to come here to establish their greatness. And I'm saying their greatness in capital letters. And then, even in this technological age, where we have minerals that they need, they still need to come here. So, whilst it might look negative that they are giving Africa's history from their point of view, it actually shows how much they cannot do without us. And we are going back to the position that we've always gone, that racism is a recent invention. Racism is used to divide, to separate us from the progress that humanity has made over the thousands of years. And if we're going to talk of Africans as being the leading people in the thousands of years, how come we're said to have no contribution? How come we're being presented as the people that needed to be rescued? Because the first sentence in the highlighted section says, it seemed a positive deliverance of our ancestors, as if our ancestors are not part of the global development that humanity has taken. I mean, we talk of science, we talk of maths, we talk of architecture, we talk of mining. They were coming to this continent to look for gold because we knew how to process gold. We knew the formula that was needed to process the minerals that we have here. But because of the little conscience they have, they then present us as primitive in order for them to justify slavery. So, can you imagine someone taking people from a land where humanity is respected, where there's Ubuntu, where people are united, where people work together, where whilst we had a form of slavery, it wasn't chattel slavery. We had no prisons. We had criminals, yes, but we had a different way of dealing with them. And they look at us and they say, oh, let's enslave a few people, then they will progress. They will move out of the dark continent. They will be with us. In terms of exploitation and material wealth. That's not how we define success. So for me, for example, we're still tied down. We're still going back to Europe. This time we're going back to the West on our own, of our own accord, because we've been convinced that success is material accumulation. Success is moving away from your family and humanity. Success is being individualistic. This is
Mr.
why,
Tapua,
yes.
as you land, I want to bring element there. You have touched on what I wanted, and that is the
Okay.
last part when you're saying that by enslaving our ancestors, they claim they were saving our ancestors.
Yes.
You see, which then speaks to what Sawindo was asking. This deliverance is biblical deliverance. So this is how they're trying to say that if you are delivered in the so-called biblical deliverance, then you have moved from whatever they call sinful to something they call holy, or to something they call blessed. If you take it to our context of what Sister Tapu is saying in our ancestors, then them coming to the continent, finding us maybe we were not putting on the clothes they were putting on, finding us living in our traditional setup, which they thought was in inertia, or they thought it was primitive, and they wanted to think about it. Then they're saying that by now taking us away from there to there, where they want to take us, maybe in Caribbean and America, was saving us from primitivity, or saving us from that darkness, so that they are helping to justify that. So to them, they were comfortable that they were doing a mission, evangelism, to help us out of where we were, which they think was dark and bad, to where they think was salvation. And what you are connecting to Tapua to the current setup is the mentality that is still with us, that when somebody says, I'm going to, where it's called a Greenland or whatever, when somebody leaves Africa, they are saying they're going to, I don't know what, for their greener pasture. So it's like you saved yourself from the poverty of Africa, you are running now, you are going to be happy. That is the same mentality they came with, which, as you're saying, Sister Tapua, and I agree with you, is a total lie.
Yes.
Please go ahead,
And
Sister Tapua.
can I add just two more things here? We have learned about the association between the politicians and religion. And when the colonialists came, like my brother gave an example of a spiritual leader leaders who were convinced to say certain things. This was the alliance that we're talking about. Because the religious leaders, it doesn't matter whether it's Christianity or any other religion, they will be in bed with politicians to their advantage. So what we have here is a situation where, as they saw what was happening, the African religious leaders saw our traditional religious political leaders losing power. They shifted to aligning themselves with the colonialists. So we shouldn't be surprised by that. But then the most important thing for me is that what has happened today, when we're talking of climate change, we're talking of reducing carbon footprint. You know, when the white men came, they said living in huts, mud huts, was primitive. Using grass to thatch our homes was primitive. Now they're telling us that in order to be advanced, in order to save the planet, we should leave the least footprint. We shouldn't be manufacturing all this galvanized iron, doing all this mining, destroying the environment, and so on, so that we are with it, so that we are saving the planet. And I always say to myself, God, were we not cheated? Because African way of life leaves the least footprint. If you look at Africa today, we've had millions of people over the millennia living on this continent. What footprint have they left? We build homes that last you a lifetime. We don't put title on land because the next person who's coming is supposed to live on the same land, and therefore they can build themselves a home. But what we have, which has been said to be development for us, is not development. Let's move away from this idea that if we are going to be developed, we have to measure our level of development based on the West's development. Because we know the development from the West was built on theft and exploitation. Therefore, what are we saying? We are saying that if we are going to be developed, we have to find someone to steal from. Someone has to lose here. Because if we are going to achieve the levels of development or define our development as defined by other people, then
Okay.
we're in trouble. Thank you. I'll stop there for now.
No, thank you, Sister Support. I'll go to the next person who hasn't spoken, but I want to capture two things. One is that the sentence that Sister Support you have referred to, the last sentence of the previous paragraph, is very important because it ends by saying that colonialism and imperialism employed the account of African history and anthropology as instruments of their oppressive ideology. Which ideology is this oppressive ideology? Capitalism. Capitalism, in its embodiment of what they call it idealism, is this oppressive ideology. And it's very important what you have highlighted there. And I think one thing we need to also understand that this element of the question that was raised by Brother Windhoek is the positive deliverance of our ancestors. Taking our ancestors out of the continent in an enslavement. They don't care even how ruthless that was. To them, they want to say it was a positive enslavement. And that's why I think in 1619, the name Jesus, coming from that ship that left Ghana in 1619, which was called Jesus. And when you use the name Jesus, sometimes it also seems like a savior. The ship that carried the slaves from the West Coast in 1619 was called Jesus. Which means they were too convinced on their biblical entitlement with the enslavement as a way of enforcing their deliverance. And that's why even up to date, the silent code of Jesus being the deliverer, who delivers from our sin to salvation, is still relevant up to date. The ship was called Joint European Slave Union Ship, Jesus, the abbreviation. And what I want to tie with this is that then the repatriation call of our brothers and sisters outside the continent should also be seen as a deliverance of our brothers and sisters from that if the thing was positive to what we recognize now is negative and want to come back home. And that's why Marcus Mosiah Garvey was very straight in his mind when he started the ship that was to come back to Africa. I just want to leave it there a bit. Let me get more input from more members who haven't spoken. Sister Portia, please.
Thank you, King Brother Cole.
Wait, Sister Portia. Wait, sure. Brother Usu, I'm sharing the book on the chat. So confirm for me if that's the book on the chat. Sister Portia, please go ahead.
Thank you, King Brother Coco. And I did not greet everyone. Many greetings all, and many appreciation to all that have spoken already. Much respect, Queen Sister Tapua. Much respect, Elder Sam. Much respect, Elder Bernie. And equally you, King Brother, for your insights. I'll go line by line, and then I'll give my comments, which are 4. The first sentence is saying, basically, no history equals African society and culture. And this is by the so-called experts, though it's not said there in this that first sentence. And then another thing about the first sentence is, if talking about Africa, then it was the worst of so-called African history that was talked about, which equals or equates to justifying slavery in the Americas, justifying trafficking in the Americas, justifying slavery in the Americas, justifying trafficking in the Americas as a so-called deliverance, also known as, quote, colonialism. And I'm quoting from something that I've heard before in different forms. Quote, colonialism had good things too, end quote. Good things too for African people, end quote. Then the second sentence is saying that trafficking of African people was deemed now illegal. And then the so-called, the sentence doesn't say so-called. This is me trying to challenge those English language words. Because as mentioned, I've contended in writing, a past writing, that the English language is oppressive. And I'm not the only one who said that. So I want to make note of the ones who were before me. So the so-called experts of Africa presents African culture and society as being primitive and limited, also known as colonialization was ordained to bring Christianity and was ordained to bring Christianity and civilization in Africa. The third sentence basically says again, Africa equals primitiveness, limitedness. Then the fourth sentence goes on to say that the so-called experts tried to change the facts, and they did this by in horrible manners that are not humane, by measuring our ancestors' skulls, by saying that Africa was unblessed in terms of governing, and Africa didn't have economic or spiritual progress. So the so-called experts lied about Africa, again, by saying Africa is primitive and limited and is basically in need. This goes out to the later sentence, but basically fifth sentence says those lies basically was that Africa was not a did not have highly sophisticated cultures, and those cultures were in need of guardians and also resisting change. I'm going to make a comment about this in a moment. And then that sixth sentence goes on to say that since the lies were that Africa did not have a highly sophisticated societies or culture, and that African was in need of guardians, then the sixth sentence says that purported needing guardianship could only be implemented if there was first political subjugation. Now to my four main points. So A, and I want to look up it while I'm saying this. I had my head down reading. So the English language places a negative and a positive, or negative and positive, on certain colors. This is why one of the reasons why I say it's an oppressive language. I now say, and I have continued to say, that Africa is a perfect dark continent. It's a beautiful dark continent, just like it's a perfect red continent, orange continent, blue continent. I push back on how can a language that oppressed peoples now come and tell us that our darkness, our blackness, our regions, something's wrong. Something's wrong with that language. So how I challenge that is when I am using colors, I don't equate a color or a shade of color as being evil. Darkness is beautiful. So if I say Africa is a perfect dark continent, I then say Africa is a perfect dark, all colors, red, orange, blue, because nothing is wrong with being dark. Nothing is wrong with being black. And so I push back on that. So we are a perfect dark continent. We have amazing colors, and no English language is going to change that. The second point goes back to what I'm saying about challenging these English language words. So when you see in the text, there's that point about change, that we resist change. That was in the fourth sentence. And then you hear the point about us not having civilization. So if you move away from the English language, the oppressive English language, and I hope I will learn Kiswahili, it's my intention. I would imagine, and this is over in West Africa, when our ancestors were welcoming in the spirit of Ubuntu, at the time they didn't know they were oppressors, but they're welcoming them. And then later on, they start seeing people trafficking, our African ancestors trafficking. Then they see that, oh, wait a minute, this change is oppressive in whatever the African language or languages is over in West Africa. Oh, this is oppressive. This is not change. This is oppressive in the African language. Oh, and this is not civilization. This is subjugation. You see, the English language tricks with its words. So change in the English language is a mirage. It's really oppression. Civilization in the English language, I contend, is another mirage. It's really subjugation. And I'm talking about oppressors here. And then to see what reminded me when they're talking about this change, which is really oppression, and this civilization, which is really subjugation, is the 1915 film by David Ward Griffin titled Birth of a Nation. In that film, they tried to portray our ancestors who were in the United States of America as being uncivilized, but actually they in that film were uncivilized. And then the D part, I contend. And then the D part is this point that I have about not for any type of slavery. And I want to go slowly here. I know that in our continent and around the world, for example, the Indian Ocean trafficking that lasted almost 400,000 years, I know that slavery has existed. And now I'm talking contemporary. We as a people, we can make mistakes. I think our ancestors made a mistake with slavery, though it wasn't that racialized slavery. I am not for any type of slavery. So I want to say that gently, and it's not trying to put a blame on our ancestors, just saying now in a contemporary where we can know when we make mistakes, and we know as Homo sapiens here we can make mistakes. I am not for any more slavery. I yield.
Thank you, Sister Portia. Welcome, Brother Coco, Delta Glenn, and I will be interested, Delta Glenn, also on your thoughts on this text on slavery and enslavement, which is being shared here. So maybe I'll come to you later. And Sister Portia, I remember there's something they said that the white man used a reverse psychology. So somebody says, every word that a white man says, reverse it. It means the difference, the opposite. So when he said Africa was dark or uncivilized, basically they mean that they were uncivilized. There's something like that. I don't know if it's true on most of the time, but somebody said somewhere. But these people use a reverse tactic. So if you read their text, reverse it. They are referring to themselves, not to you. But they want to reverse it, and everything they talk about, when they put anything negative about you, basically they're talking about themselves, but they do the reverse writing on it. But that's just what I came across sometimes. So let me hear what Sir Windhoek, you had not shared your thoughts, Sir Windhoek. You only ask a question.
So it's self-projection. Whatever a white man say is self-projection.
Yeah, something like that. So they say about you, but actually they are projecting themselves. And when they say you are dark, basically they're meaning they're dark. When they say you are evil, basically they're meaning they're evil. Something like that. But I don't know if it works out, but that's just their part of it. But Sir Windhoek, you had only asked a question. You have not shared your thoughts. So please, can you be able to share your thoughts? Or
No, pass.
okay. Brother Benny, can you confirm for me if the book I've shared is the book you're talking about? I've checked the author is the same. I'm not able to find a PDF, but I found a EPUB for it.
Unfortunately, I downloaded it, but I can't open it. Maybe until we
Is
finish.
a
check
EPUB?
my
So
download. Yeah.
I'll convert it
So,
to you, but it's Jeremy. It's same Jeremy. So you have it.
But I know
I'll
that
convert it.
only Hajar Institute used to, give this to pastors when they send them there for, I think it was about 3 months training or so. And then they come back with this rare book.
I'll share it to you before the end of the session in a PDF.
Okay,
thank you. Let's get to Sister Grace. Sister Grace, are you able to share your thoughts with us?
Because I came in late again, but I can only comment on what others have contributed. So I'm hearing how they colonized us, how they enslaved us, and how they do it, their approach and things like that. But then I'm looking at the way things are happening today. It seems to be the same process without the white man himself. Sometimes he's there, or sometimes he's behind the scenes. But as Africans ourselves, we are taking after that pattern. And previously, we've said those our ancestors at the time did ABCD, but the young people today are still picking up on the habit and the pattern, and it carries on and it's advancing and it's getting more complex. Recently, I've been watching a tribe called Hezebe. Has anybody seen the Hezebe in Tanzania? Is it Hezebe? Where you have Shaba and Dudukwe. These are people, can you hear me?
We can hear you, and we know about the Hazebe, brother, sister.
Yes. So
Thank you.
I've been trying to find out where they are, but it turns out they are in Tanzania. So they are Bushmen. That's what they're calling them. And they live in the bush, the normal way the Bushman would live, hunting, eating what they eat, living and dressing the way they do and speaking the way they do. But whoever discovered them, so they're being bombarded with tourists wherever they live. And there's, I think one guy who is working more with them. I don't know whether he's from Tanzania himself. So he does all these videos. So everybody goes to do videos with them for views and whatever not. I don't know whether they give them anything or what. I don't know. But anyway, so there's this particular guy who insists on teaching them English. So because there are two of them who are like the biggest stars, Dudukwe and what's the other one, Shaba. So Dudukwe, when he's taught the English, he pronounces it, I'm going to use the same bad word, he pronounces it very well. Whereas the other one will mix up the words or the syllables or the pronouns and things like that. So, and then people will comment in the post or the video, how Dudukwe is doing very well, how they are, and then they laugh at the other one, they make jokes about him, they say all sorts of negative things about him because he's not pronouncing the English well and he doesn't seem to understand. And oh, Dudukwe is a good learner, is a what, very soon we'll see him in the West, very soon we'll see him one day in a suit, very soon, oh, do these people bath, oh, do these people, can't they wear some clothes? And then when they're brushing their teeth with sticks, and some Indian looking men, they also come there and they take away this stick toothbrush and giving them the normal toothbrush and toothpaste. And obviously they don't like the taste and whatever. And they show them how to cook the modern food. They bring the modern food and they're trying to. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, this is exactly how we got colonized. People just turn up. They start teaching you all sorts of things. And they want you to change the way you live. People are making comments about the way they live. A few people are saying positively about the way they live. But at the end of the day, huge numbers of people are coming to see them, meet them, including white people themselves. They just come in groups with their cars and then they'll get Dudukwe and Shaba in the car driving seat and all sorts of things. And now there are videos coming up. They're being taken into town to events and things like that. And the AI is now showing them in suits, drinking wine and all sorts of things. So as African people, we're just repeating everything we're complaining about, just looking down on people who look like them and wanting everybody to look like a Western person, dress like a Western person. Well, how they're dressing is wrong. And sometimes they'll bring them these clothes, they'll wear them, and then they'll throw them away again, and they wear their own skin. They wear these skin things that they hang over one shoulder. And they wear back their skin clothes. And they continue eating the intestines, and people are saying, why don't they eat the proper meat? They keep eating the intestine. So ourselves, we're doing the same things we complain about. So I don't know where we're heading with all this. I don't know if people in Tanzania have seen these people. And then they, at one point, they were speaking Swahili. And people are like, oh, they do speak Swahili, but they have their own language as well. So, but everybody wants them to change them into Western-looking people. They've even given them haircuts to look like, So I don't know. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Sister Tapua, will you allow me to take other hands, or is it urgent? You can go ahead. Sister Tapua?
A quick follow on what my sister has said. Thank you very much, sister. I think what we need to acknowledge is the last sentence in the highlighted paragraph. And this tutelage, it was thought, could only be implemented if we were first subjugated politically. So what Dudukwe and the others are getting subjected to is tutelage. Remember, we're saying tutelage is when you're given one-to-one so that you appear like them. And after they're gone, you're the flag bearer. So the type of African that we have, particularly the mentally colonized African, is an African who's holding the flag of the white people because they've been tutored. And they've been tutored and accepted the negative history that we have. So we have people saying, what good comes out of Africa?
Hello, can you hear me?
Like that. We are meant to have the type of leaders that we have. And therefore, when
Just finish, Sister Tapua.
making a mistake if we just leave that comment at the door of the having them undo that. So sorry about, thank you.
Sorry, can I just add one little thing? So whilst people are making these comments and trying to teach them how to change, when they are with their own community, the same Shaba they laugh at, seems to be the most respected person in the community. They listen to him, he gives orders, and things like that. Dudukwe is not as high up as they're young guys. There seem to be some elderly people in there, but this Shaba guy seems to be the one who is looked up upon. But then in the other society, he's looked down upon. That's what I wanted to comment on.
Thank you, Sister Chisomo. Brother Coco?
Has Brother Leroy contributed yet? Let me ask.
Just come in. I think he said he's on mute, but just come in. Brother Usu, confirm also if the PDF I've shared is the right one. It's not in PDF. Thank you. Brother Coco?
I don't know. I am at the point where I am despairing, or you can call it anguish, because we are at the juncture where it's very difficult to extricate the Africanness in us. And so I think let me just recollect my thought and go back to the text. The text is a continuation of the paragraph we were reading last week, which showed how they used our history, or how they falsified our history in order to justify their enslavement of us. And here we see a continuation of that. They are moving from enslavement now into colonization. And this is what happened exactly in history. When enslavement was declared illegal, they didn't have any more money. They didn't have any more cash cows that they were taking from Africa and selling to America, to the Americans, and making money out of. But they realized that it would be easy to run the same industry, but in this case, in Africa, without transporting anyone. So they had to cook up some reasons for doing that. And one of those advocates for that was a missionary, doctor, explorer called David Livingstone. When you read David Livingstone's letters, you actually understand the psyche of the white man, how he thinks about us as black people. So there was that infantilization, if that is the right word, seeing us as infants, seeing us as people who needed protection, and seeing us as people who needed tutelage, and also civilization and Christianization. So hence he uses those three terms, and they become the motto of everyone who comes to Africa. They needed to civilize us by taking away our culture, our ways of doing things, and making us look down on those ways of doing things and adopt their own and see their own as superior to ours. Hence the white supremacy. So Christianization came in as well, because then it made us soft. It made us turn the other cheek and also look away from our way of spiritualization. Because in the text there, it also alludes to lack of spiritualization. The Africans are people of spirituality, like some of the best when it comes to spirituality. But they had to dampen that, make us feel like what we are worshipping or what we were revering was wrong. That's why now when you talk to a normal African, they will tell you, oh, you are praying to your ancestors? That's wrong. But the same person is not afraid to go and pray to the saints in a Roman Catholic Church. Those saints are white ancestors. The same thing. But in this case, we had to let go of our own. It was part of the strategy. That 3 C's strategies: Christianization, civilization, and the third is commercialization. By commercialization is the way that they used us as a market for their finished products. They are still doing that today because they will come to Africa and get the raw materials at very, very cheap prices. They didn't even add value on those products in Africa where they sourced the materials from. They took the materials to the West, added the value on those products, and then sold us back those products at a higher cost. Hence, we are perpetually indebted. That's where the debt comes from. Because you cannot sell wool that you just remove from the sheep there for, say, $5 a gram, and then the white man goes and develops that into a blanket, and then he sells that blanket back to you. You are buying it at $20. Where is that $15 coming from? Where is it coming from? It's one of those tricks that we never really thought about. I'm reading Basutoland records because I come from Lesotho, and it's interesting what you just explained there, the Sister Chisomo and Sister Tapua, is what I see our chief then, the founding father, seeing at the beginning when he saw the English. He was enamored by how they were doing things, enamored by their governance, enamored by everything about them. And from what I remember, the story we are told is that they gave him tea. They put lots and lots of sugar in his tea. And after that, he never stopped drinking tea. He loved the tea. So it's that either that once we have been introduced to Western ways of doing things, we forget totally about our own ways of doing things, and we embrace those, and it becomes part of and parcel of our culture. I don't know. It's very difficult to say. You can say culture changes as you meet different cultures, but there are things which you ask yourself, were those things really necessary? It's a question which I think the author is asking us to reflect on. Think carefully, as in all of those things which they said you should adopt, were they the right things? Were the Europeans really the first ones to master civilization, or did they learn civilization from you and then came back and tried to teach you about civilization that they learned from you? And it wasn't even the original. But the problem comes here in where the African doesn't know themselves. If the African doesn't know himself, then it's easy for the African to take whatever comes by and adopt it. That is what the problem is. And I think that's what Sister Tapua is saying. Colonization is happening now without the white man, because now we are forgotten who we are. And this is why Frantz Fanon, may he live forever. It was his 100th birthday on the 20th. He said we needed to decolonize first before we politically decolonized, which is what they did first. They had to put in political colonization on us before they put the tutelage on our own. So what we had to do was to get rid of the inferiority complex that they put in us before we throw the shackles of political colonization. But instead, what we did, we threw away the political colonization and then wanted to keep everything as it is. Then Sister Tapua, in that case, you see English as superior to Chechewa. or Nyanja or any other language in Africa. You see, they address science as the best. And you see their religion as the in thing, the right thing. That's why an African, when you ask them, why do you pray a God who doesn't represent what you look like? Because if there is a family, there is a father, a mother, and a child. That makes sense. But where you have a father and you have a son and then you have a Holy Spirit, where is the mother who is such a powerful goddess? Where is the mother? They will say, no, it doesn't make sense. If I stop praying this God, then which God am I going to pray? Because then we have lost our roots as Africans. We have forgotten. We have forgotten who we are. And it's easy to mislead and it's easy to colonize. So that, the reverse is what we should have done. Remove mental colonization first and then deal with political colonization. Otherwise, what we are doing now, we are black skins, white masks. So we are white men or black men, I mean, what do I call it? Europeans in African skins. Let me not go too far. Probably I might even insult some of my brothers' ears. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Coco. Thank you very much. I really like what you're saying because there's a lot to reflect on your words, your thinking, and I think we need to. Let me get to Brother Glenn. There's some few things I wanted to come back to, but let me get to Brother Glenn first. Brother Glenn, Elder, please. Elder Glenn.
Yes, as I said in my text, comrade, just really listening. I perhaps later on would like to comment on what I've heard, but I know we're short of time, but I would like to wait a bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you. At this particular moment, I wanted to point out that, remember, we are dealing with society and ideology. And these people fashion their ideology, which the last sentence says are oppressive ideology. And I remember when Brother Coco, you were speaking, Ngugi wa Thiong'o in his book, The River Between, he tells Kamau tells his son Wayaki that go in their school, learn what they say, but do not follow their ways. But some of us, and what Nkrumah says in the beginning is colonial students, went into school, learned their things, and followed their way. And their ways seem to be very civilized ways. I do go to some meetings in some hotels in Kenya here, and when we sit at the table, they bring all types of forks and everything else and spoons. And in my tradition, I do tell them that I don't eat with spoons. In fact, I do tell them that to bring me forks and spoons, my ancestors will be sad and mad where they are, especially for ugali, because my community respects ugali a lot. So I see some people take spoons and forks to eat ugali, which is not in my tradition. And people see me like that and think that I'm not that civilized enough because I don't take ugali using whatever they use. So then I remember one quote in Swahili which says, Mwachamila ni mtumwa. He who leaves his or her culture is a slave. So with that, let me get anybody want to come in, please, unmute yourself and contribute. We are done with all our rounds. Yeah, Elder Glenn, please.
Yes, given the time, I thought perhaps let me say something now. I've just caught the tail end of the conversation, and
Elder Glenn.
Yes, go ahead.
I would also be interested just to hear your thinking in the first sentence of that line, which says that earlier on, such disparaging accounts have been given of African society and culture as to prepare to justify slavery. And slavery, both against this account, seem a positive deliverance of our ancestors. When the slave trade and slavery became illegal, the experts on Africa yielding to the new wind of change and now began to present African culture and society as being so rudimentary and primitive that colonialism was a duty of Christianity and civilization. I'm very interested on your thoughts on those words.
Yeah, thank you. Before I do that, on that theme, I really, if no one, if people have not seen it, I would suggest if people on here remember a broadcaster by the name, well, remember him, he's still around, name of Lemon, which seems an appropriate name, who was interviewing a European about enslavement and more appropriately, reparation. And has had some young woman had some interesting response, completely absurd, but nonetheless caught Lemon quite off guard, lack of his own knowledge about the issue. And it was about enslavement and the British claiming to be the people who ended it. The reality of this particular sentence that you read out, the premise of saying when the so-called trade became illegal is a point that I have a problem with, because it was always illegal. No African nation had any laws that permitted their people being kidnapped, murdered in that process, and transported abroad. So the premise of anyone making it illegal when it was illegal in the first place give credence to the suggestion that the enslavers themselves made the process illegal. And just for an historical context, people should remember that the First Nation that ended enslavement in the Western Hemisphere was Haiti. But before I get too deeply in this, I just wanted to respond to what you had said earlier on. It's anecdotal just to say that someone said you can lose your knife and fork, but you won't lose your hand, is in response to your analogy about being asked to use knives and fork. Obviously, people do because of the cultural inclusion. But I also wanted to say, when Coco was saying about education, and indeed some of the discussion around being educated in European school, or indeed the contents of the chapter here about, or your statement just now about learning or go and learn their ways, but do not apply their ways. I mean, it is an analogy that I think the Catholic use, which suggests that if they are able to get a child from 5 to 15 or 5 to 10, I can't remember the exact quote, then they can ensure that they remain a Catholic throughout their lives. And I think the same principle applies about trying to infuse in us and other community European values. If they are allowed to enter our schools, they're allowed to be our teachers, etc., etc. I think I've told you, Elder Pigeon, that we came across a notice in a school here in Zanzibar that says that you were only allowed to speak English. The children, I think they were junior, were only allowed to speak English or Arabic. Now, Arabic is a language on the continent. Yes, it's a language spoken in Egypt and other places. But here in Zanzibar, we're supposed to speak Swahili. And the statement further goes on and say, by order, you're not allowed to speak Swahili. So I just wanted, based on the discussion we're having about the education system and what you've said, Elder, what you've said, Pigeon, reminds me of the need for us to be alerted to the philosophy that it's the young they want to capture and educate in the form and fashion that they believe will stay with them for the rest of their lives. And we should be conscious of that. I know it's slightly at odds with the chapter, having read it a little while ago, but I just thought I'd interject those points. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elder Glenn. Thank you very much for what you're saying. I really wanted to hear your comment, and thank you for what the practice of the Catholic Church. I wanted to hear your comment, Brother Elder Glenn, on when Brother Sawindok asked the question that this slavery was seen as a positive deliverance of our ancestors. And I was tying it to the first of all, the element of repatriation. And I've tied it also to several elements, that the element of deliverance, which is biblical in this context of our ancestors, tied to the ship that was called Jesus in 1619, that took some of our ancestors out there, and the element of how the name Jesus is being used to deliver people in terms of either from sin and the rest, how these words are being connected. Because you see, Dr. First talks about the word supremacy code. Now, I was thinking then, if then our enslavement was a deliverance to them, then how about our repatriation becoming our deliverance from what they thought was a holy place to us, but to us demanding that it's time where you think that where you thought is a green place for us, you're finding it no longer green as what you purport. We want to go back to that Africa, which you thought was not good enough for us. That's where we want to call home. And some of us who have made, or some of the people have made that step to come back home, then does it mean that they have undergone some level of consciousness that what people purport, even today, when people run away from the continent and think that they're going for a greener pasture, a good life out there, and when somebody is reversing, coming back to where you are running from, is it some element of going deep to understand that? I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I look, I think it needs to be very clearly, for me, very clearly understood that the right of the first people on this planet to be able to go anywhere on this planet they wish to go is the first truth that I feel we must be very clear on. In other words, there ought to be no place that we cannot or should not be able to go as African people. Yeah, that needs to be very much understood. The idea that somehow this is a deliverance, enslavement, or taking our people away, tries to denote the idea that African people did not travel or had not traveled before enslavement. And this is an important factor in a number of literature by people like even recent authors like sorry, I've forgotten, I can't read the name now, who wrote when we ruled. It's quite a seminal book that we need to read. A number of other authors, I'm sure people can think of, have made it clear that we have traveled. We were in the Americas before Columbus, is another literature that puts that out. So when people try to say that somehow our traveling start with enslavement is something we have to actually address. And the extraordinary thing is that people should also understand that Africans were in Europe, in England before enslavement. We were there trading with European. Acts, legislation were brought in to take away the wealth and property. Thank you, Koga. The wealth and property of Africans who existed in Africa, in Europe, traveled Europe. You look at plays like that involve African merchants before enslavement. So people should really be very clear that anyone who tries to protestate that somehow enslavement, which is a European trait, by the way, saying that they came to civilize us, is a very famous one that they tried. But, you know, the idea that somehow we were being transported, and this presented an opportunity for, I think the next phrase is travel broadens the mind, etc., etc. It did not represent anything of that sort. The reality is that enslavement was the barbaric thing that everyone saw it to be, and we should not sugarcoat it in any way. But as I said, if someone can find that clip with this Jack Lemon, I think it's Jack Lemon, certainly Lemon is his surname, who was being interviewed or really being ambushed by a European woman who said that they, Europeans, should receive reparation for ending enslavement. So I really just want to put that in there. But just to respond to what you're saying, no, we should never ever see this as some sort of representation of, I can't remember the phrase you use, but suggest that somehow this is a travel or give us an opportunity to see the world. I've heard people say that. I've heard Africans say that, you know, that they're grateful that their ancestors were taken from the continent, giving them an opportunity in the West, etc., etc. And there will be more of this as we continue our fight for reparation. Many Africans will be coming out explaining why we do not deserve reparation, much more than Europeans will be. So let's be prepared for that. I don't know if I've addressed what you said, but that's my response. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let me share just my thoughts a bit. Remember, I didn't share my thoughts a bit. Then we can go on maybe towards the end of this session and more people coming in. Now, I have actually talked a bit on the first sentence. And the second sentence, what we were discussing a bit, that when the slave trade and slavery became illegal, the expert on Africa yielded to the new wind of change. Who are these experts? Who are these experts? And it says that when they yielded to the new change and now began to present African culture and society as being so rudimentary and primitive. Now, the first act of violence is happening to us, enslaving our people. Then you go ahead to justify that as a holy mission that you're delivering our ancestors. Now, whether you call it the abolishment or the abolition of slavery or enslavement, and as Brother Elder Glenn is saying that it was never legal in the first place. Now, when that happens, now you still come back to paint us as how primitive we are. And that's why I need actually somebody who can help me know who are these experts of Africa. Because now we have stopped, or there's an abolishment of enslavement, slavery, which means we have to stay here. Now you come to start painting that culture again as being primitive and rudimentary. And now, and you see how the white man was trying to put their thoughts. Slavery happened during imperialism. Now, when imperialism was stopping, which was being pegged and defended by so-called deliverance, now you want to create a ground for colonialism. And for you to find a ground for colonialism, which are the two oppressive ideologies that were being described in the previous chapter, you have to come with something. So paint us rudimentary and primitive. And that now you're coming back again with Christianity and civilization to help us. Enlighten us in that your way so that you're primitive. You want to get us out of that. I don't know what now they're using today to defend their neo-colonialism. Now it goes ahead and says that even if we were no longer on the evidence of the shape of our skull regarded as the missing link and blessed, look at how they think of us with the acts of good governance, good government, material and spiritual progress was still regarded as representing the infancy of mankind. Very big words that are very heavy here. So how do you judge how civilized we are? You judge us by saying our governance was not good governance. So your government was good government here. You judge us by saying we did not have much material progress and spiritual progress. Well, we had gods, over 42 of them. And you describe us that we are representing the infancy of mankind. As if you, who think you are superior, is not a mankind. It goes ahead to say that our highly sophisticated culture was said to be as simple and paralyzed by inertia. But I like the element of saying our culture was highly sophisticated. Indeed, it was highly sophisticated to them, but to us it was not sophisticated. And they're saying they actually call it as simple and paralyzed by nature, and that they head now to teach us. And their teaching, it was thought, will only be implemented by first subjugating us politically. So by first bringing colonialism and putting that dominance and border so that we are your colonies. And then you want now to pass your information. That is my thought. Anybody want to come in? We have some 12 minutes to go. Please feel free. Anybody want to come back or want to highlight something?
Yes, King, Brother Pigeon, thank you so much. I think we had really a good discussion today. I want to come back as a foundational Black American who returned home to a Kibulan. I think these are they're like side tricks, because in an oppressive system, you know, there has to be these tricks to keep the oppressive system going, oppressive systems or systems. And one of the tricks, one of the deceptions, because the system or system is very much built on deception, lies, as we have read here. Their deception is that none of us are African, and that some of us in a certain geographical region are better off, because the lie is that Africa is not great. So when I knew I really was with love with Africa is when I read and saw the autobiography of Malcolm X, because in that book he talks of Africa. And I can remember distinctly loving with Africa. I remember exactly where I was. I remember the brother, and I remember me picking up the book. So Africa, I always yearned to return home. Now that hasn't been easy because of the oppressive systems. If I said before, which I have, is that just imagine if most of the diaspora, those who are not living on the continent of Africa, those who have left Africa of their own will, who are living throughout the world, return consciously. By conscious mean awareness that these oppressive systems or this oppressive system is not, no matter what we do, is in our best interest. Imagine if they return to home, a Kibulan, and return to the indigenous ways of Africa, which Queen Sister Tapua has already said it was great. There is evidence. This is not hyperbole. So I'm so thankful I had that though I can arguably say I didn't get conscious until my middle age, I'm so thankful I got touched to return home. And that's what I have been fighting over 30 years, to settle home. And so that in itself is revolutionary. However, that revolutionary has to come with a relearning of indigenous Akibulan. My first time in Africa, even up to now, I am continuously relearning what is of Akibulan, what is not of Akibulan. So this is not to idolize Akibulan. You heard me earlier say that we have made mistakes because in this body we are humans and for sure we'll make mistakes. It is rather to know that what we had indigenously, it was better, much better, extremely better than what we could ever have now in oppressive systems or an oppressive system. I yield.
Thank you so much. Elder Glenn?
Can I pose a question to the House? It doesn't have to be answered now, but people could think about it. Does anyone know of an African country, indeed any countries around the globe, which in 1960 was designated a developing country, and one that has now been designated developed country? Thank you.
This is a very, Brother Elder Glenn is asking any country in the world which was by 1960 designated as developing country, and now it's designated as developed country. Okay. Of that is true. Any other person want to come in? We are having around 7 minutes to go.
Can I try?
Yeah, please go ahead, Elder Sam.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I will be accurate, but following our study last week, when we were talking about the 200 years anniversary of Haiti, we realized, or we learned there, that African, or in fact, let me start here. I think, Brother Pidgin, you asked a question earlier. When we were in our liberation war in South Africa, we learned from the Chinese, and Mao Zedong taught us that we should oppose what the enemy supports, and we must support what the enemy opposes. And that's the philosophy we use in our tactics and strategies to fight our war. So I want to answer Brother Denway in the fact that they have already said in the beginning, in their own connotation, and I think I like what Sister Portia said. Maybe even the English language, we should start opposing it because it has its own cultural connotations for everything and its own meaning according to it. They have already classified us in that bracket, undeveloped, undeveloped, and undeveloped. So they will not liberate us. In that study, what we did, we heard that France without Africa would be nothing. France, which is currently seen as a world in the first world, according to them, would be nothing without what they are doing in Africa, which is plundering and plundering and plundering. But the same goes to Britain, the same goes to America. So they will never classify us as developing because they have perpetually put us there. As we speak, even if they can declare us as developing, we are definitely not going anywhere because we are paying debt after debt after debt. As we speak in South Africa, in the reign only of President Ramaphosa, we have borrowed over 200 billion US dollars. So if you take what the apartheid regime was owing to the world and which we absorbed and took over as we came in our so-called freedom in 94, we will never develop. And that's what we learned in the study of Haiti, that they have indebted us, they will keep us there, and they want to worsen it by keeping even our minds enslaved, that we don't see any progress even amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. I've realized the two countries that they're listing as developed in Africa is Mauritius and Seychelles. And you know what those countries get their money from. So those are the only countries in Africa that appear in any record as being developed from being developing in 1960s. And Mauritius and Seychelles, you know, they are all tax havens, and they are all tax havens of those whom we know. So the Coco coming, we have 5 minutes.
Sorry, Chair. When I say develop, i.e. what Elder Sam is saying is, in their definition, i.e. a westernized country or a country equivalent to a westernized nation. Yes, there are countries that are used for tax haven, as you rightly say, but are they listed in whatever category, and I'm not sure where such a listing will be,
Yes,
that says
they are.
this is now a developed country?
They are listed, like Seychelles is currently listed as developed country according to HDI of 0.785. The same is happening to Mauritius, but previously outside they have things like Poland, Malaysia, they have things like Taiwan, things like Hong Kong, Singapore, and South Korea. But you see very rare on Africa, on their terms. Brother Coco?
Thank you, comrades. Well, the general, I won't answer your question because I don't believe in all of those Western ways of classifying countries. Especially, they will use what we call GDP, which is the amount of money which was produced within a year in that country. At one point within SADC, we were trying to raise funds. Then we looked at GDP per capita, which is the amount of money per an adult. So we divide that by population and to see which country is doing better and how much each of those countries can pay. Then we went to Seychelles, because Seychelles looked like they had a lot of money. But that actually drove Seychelles out of SADC. Seychelles were at the point of walking away from SADC because Seychelles has like 100,000 people, I think, a very small population. So when you take whatever amount of money and you divide by 100,000 people, it looks like a lot of money. When you look at other countries in SADC, Southern Africa, SADC. So all of these things, they don't work. Why? Because most of the economy is within Africa. It doesn't go into the formal sector. It doesn't go into the banking sector. People trade amongst each other. They do barter. They will do work which is not quantified. So all of those measures that they use, sometimes they don't make sense. And it's meant to benefit them. However, it benefits them. I think what I wanted to contribute here was language is part and parcel of the tools that they were using to actually colonize us. The reason why we continue to use English like this is because the English went everywhere in the world creating their markets. Remember, commercialization that I meant before. And Ngugi rightly says, let's not forget, language is not only a means of communication, but is a carrier of culture. So the more we speak English, the more we transmit the English culture, the more we want to consume English-produced products, the more we want to create the affinity with the English than with our own. The more we want to come to London, where I am right now. So we need to realize what we are doing to ourselves. Is colonialism now happening without the colonizer amongst ourselves? Hence, I will redirect us to what Fanon said, what Bigo said. Before political decolonization, decolonize yourself, decolonize your mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Comrades, we have reached the end of our session for today. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you all. I believe from these readings, we have benefited a lot of what Nkrumah is trying to raise. But I want to just remind you that Nkrumah is still analyzing what it is as it is, on how society was perceived or is being perceived. Always in his trend of writing in this book, he always come to the end and share with us what is he thinking. So I really believe that this text has challenged us. There's what you've learned from it, and there's what we are seeing how those people saw us. Because sometimes you see, some of us never knew that those people saw us as that, as how it's being described here. So I know today we didn't have Brother Kwame. I've been held up on his way to home, and Sister Myra is also held up a bit. And with that regard, I want to once again thank you all and remind you that on Saturday we'll be discussing about Africa resource management. How do you manage the resources you have in Africa so that we can see how we actually unify, liberate, and develop Africa. But please come back next week so that we can continue this conversation on Thursday and try to follow what Nkrumah is trying to bring here. And I remind you, we are reading society and ideology. And you have seen how the Western ideology even tried to shape our society. Our society. So we have to realize the value of an ideology and how important it is for us as a people to also have strong routines on our ideology if we have to counter their impact on us, mental impact on us. So thank you very much. And yes, that brings us to an end of our session today, and let's meet again next week. Have a lovely evening to you all.
Good night.